Hope everyone's enjoying their day or have enjoyed their day or beginning to enjoy it. Did a interview a while back with Hoskins LLP, which is managed by the wife and husband team of Sharon and Rob Hoskins. Combined, the two bring over 30 years of legal experience to the table. We discussed the topics of divorce, prenuptial and marital agreements, child support, custody, equitable distribution, divorce mediation, modifications and enforcements. We discuss fathers' rights, legislation advice, and all the above. Some things that mothers would like to know, and some things that couples would like to know. So it's pretty in-depth interview. Hope you guys enjoy it. And here we go.
I'm glad you paid attention.
Oh my goodness. But also in the room, full house as we mentioned, none other than two guests of Dr. Michelle.
Yes. Friends to the room.
Friends to the room.
That's right. And friends of a friend to you too.
Yes, indeed.
That's the powerful thing about
and to Rich.
Yep. And to Rich.
So we're all related.
Oh my goodness.
Here we go, 6 degrees of separation. So we're like 2 degrees.
I just know I mentioned in a private group chat, and it's people all over the world, and we're connected through GroupMe. And I threw out the names of Rob and Sharon Hoskins. I said, okay, we all originally were from Queens, and I said, does this name ring a bell? And one of my buddies, who was, former attorney, now history teacher, said, oh, I know the name. He was like, yes, and I know him very well. So he spoke very, very highly of you, Rob. But with that, Rob and Sharon Hoskins, I'm expecting Michelle to give us this, beautiful introduction, but she's texting.
Social media.
I'm posting the lovely picture because if I don't post a picture, people wonder what happened. So I'm sorry.
In the world of divorce, family law, mediation, prenuptials, Rob, Sharon, welcome. I will decrease and you guys can increase.
All right. Thank you, Ted. Thanks for having us. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Welcome to the show. Sorry about that.
Not that any of us are planning to have a divorce, but we just want to make sure that we are able to give the information out there to everyone so everyone can make the best possible decision from prenups to divorce.
Absolutely. And the more information that people have, I think the easier it is to get through the process and the easier it is for you to deal with your divorce attorney when you actually have to deal with them, because that's part of the big issue that we have. There's quite a few things that the divorce attorney needs to focus on. And if you are focused yourself in presenting that information, asking the right questions, then the process will move along a little better for you.
So now, if we go back in time with history, what's the difference between divorce maybe 10, 15 years ago and present day divorce?
I think the difference between then and now, one is grounds, because depending on how far back you're going to go, right? You had to have grounds for divorce. And there was a time when pretty much the only ground was adultery. And you had to prove adultery. And so you had people actually, maybe even faking adultery in order to get out of the marriage, because then, as the woman, you would get alimony and you would just get someone to sort of play along. So now, even today, in order to get a divorce on the ground of adultery, you actually need a corroborating third-party affidavit to prove that there was adultery. You can't just say, he cheated on me or what have you. You actually have to have some other evidence to back it up. So that's why you used to see a lot of private investigators following people around and going and getting those pictures, those compromising positions and things. So they had that extra bit of evidence in order to corroborate that claim. and get their divorce on adultery. If you could prove adultery, then he didn't have to pay alimony.
So they weren't just searching to find to catch the person in the act as far as to prosecute. They were doing it in order to be able to actually claim the divorce.
Right, claim the divorce and avoid payment.
Right.
everything always comes down to money.
Right. Of course.
So we're talking about money. I know when I went to go get married, my brother said, my older brother, that the main thing you need to make sure, besides, because you can love anybody, is to make sure that everything is straight financially. So if we're thinking about that, what are the top maybe 3 reasons why maybe 10 years ago people would get a divorce compared to now?
Well, I think that over time, this is really one main component that sort of leads to a divorce or could lead to it. And I think it's a lack of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes across all areas. A lot of people may be quick to say, oh, it's infidelity or it's financial problems. But I think it starts a step before that with your communication. Because if you're not communicating well and understanding the expectations of a person or what's going on, then that leads to tension and it leads to problems. And your communication breaks down even further because you don't want to talk to someone who's giving you all kinds of attitude and so forth. And it may lead you to stray because you're looking for some comfort elsewhere. You're not getting it at home. When it comes to finances, it can lead to spending. Depends, people deal with money and retail therapy also in certain ways. So I think communication is really, I say sort of the number one reason. And that communication problem leads to all the other things that sort of end up being sort of the hair, the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Okay.
Yeah. You can look at a lot of those issues that Sharon mentioned, and communication does become the ultimate denominator, because financial issues sometimes happen because somebody gets laid off, but it's what happens after the layoff. Does the person get motivated to get back out there? Does the person try to do something, go back to school? Do they just lay on the couch and wallow in the misery?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wallowing in the misery of your layoff, your spouse is out there trying to get extra hours at work to make the household run, there breeds contentment in that situation. So there's there again, it comes back to communication and what you guys are doing together, because the marriage is a unit. It's a family unit.
Mm-hmm.
So when it can be, like Sharon said, that breakdown in communication can cause you to look for those needs elsewhere, and that's where infidelity can occur. So then the cause for divorce comes back to the same thing. It's that communication, where no matter what the actual problem is that precipitates it, it kind of starts to flow downhill. And if you don't together deal with it, meaning the financial issue or whatever the other issue is, if you don't deal with it together, then you're on the road to divorce at that point. So, to say, in order to get married, you have to have your financial situation together. I mean, does anybody ever truly have their financial situation together? I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've actually heard, people say that, I'm not going to have a kid until I actually have, my money together. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes kids don't wait for that to happen.
Right.
And you've got to make it happen, and you've got to deal with it. But that's what you are doing when you're in a marriage. You're creating that unit, and that leads, so tensions that are created when things happen in your life, the stress, it's all about how you handle it and how you communicate that with your partner, I think.
So I have a question then, and this is, I guess, along those same lines. So we've mentioned that, one of the main reasons, or one of the top reasons for divorce would have been adultery and infidelity. So you hear these days much more than you used to about irreconcilable differences as being a reason for divorce, which, I mean, that just sounds like a cheap way out to me, the non-legal kind of guy here. Tell me more about what irreconcilable differences really means in order to enable someone to break the contract of divorce.
So in New York, we actually call it the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage because we have to do it our way in New York. But, you know, irreconcilable differences, I think, is more of a California phrasing. And we see that in a lot of movies.
Right.
But New York has instituted the ground of excuse me, now you have me saying irretrievable breakdown of the marriage for at least 6 months, and that's fairly new. It came about as part of the no fault movement to have a no fault ground of divorce, and it was, I believe it was October 2010 was when that came into effect.
And New York was the last state to adopt a no fault ground.
Yeah, where New York is a little behind when it comes to those kind of things when it relates to divorce laws, but we do have it now. And you said it's a cheap way out, and really it is, right?
Okay.
Because you don't have to go to jump through hurdles to try to prove one of the other grounds for divorce. And you there was a lot of opposition to no fault, so there's a reason why it did take New York some time to adopt it, and a lot of that came from women's groups and concerns with domestic violence and so forth. But what they did do as a compromise, they said you have no fault divorce, but the court will not grant you that divorce until you satisfy and reach an agreement on all of the economic aspects and the child related issues that exist. So there was a concern that someone may just go in, get a no fault divorce and leave the other spouse, you know, hanging with no way of supporting themselves and nothing. And so that was the reason that it was done that way, to try to protect people in those situations.
Right.
But it is a cheap way out. It avoids grounds trials. Lawyers in divorce, in the matrimonial area, we don't like to do grounds trials. So it's really very much a waste of time.
What is a grounds trial?
That's when you have to prove your grounds for divorce. So that would be you're proving, like we mentioned adultery already. There's abandonment, and there's two types of abandonment. There's constructive abandonment. That's sort of the hot one. It's because it's the refusal to have sexual relations with your spouse for
and that's called
year.
what?
Constructive abandonment.
Constructive.
Yep.
And it could be the refusal to provide or the refusal to accept, right? So it's just no sexual relations for a year. There's actual abandonment, where you might lock someone out of the home, or someone might leave and just sort of disappear for, you know, at least a year. And then there's what we used to sort of call the default no fault divorce ground, with the living separate and apart for a year pursuant to a separation agreement. And so if you entered into a written agreement and you abided by that agreement for a year, you could then go into court and convert that into a divorce. So a lot of people think, well, if I want to get a divorce, do I have to wait a year? I have to do some agreement and wait. That's what they're alluding to, because they're remembering those times. But now you can just do the no fault ground and then move forward to trying to resolve the property issues and the support issues and child issues.
So what's the shortest amount of time that can usually take?
The actual process of getting a divorce? Well, that's a good question. And the answer is always, it depends. But let's say you are in complete agreement and it's basically an uncontested divorce and all your issues are resolved. Once you can fill out the paperwork actually in court, in the courthouse. They have forms provided for that. And once you submit it, the waiting period is anywhere from 6 to 9 months to actually get that divorce back and signed, because the courts are just so backed up in, you know, whether it's Nassau County, with all the counties in New York City, in the 5 boroughs, they're all just seriously backed up, and it takes that long to get your divorce judgment back. Right. So there's a little bit of a limbo period where, you know, you file, but you're not actually divorced. So, you know, you can live your life, but just don't try to get married yet.
Right.
But that's a procedural delay. Or rather, that's an administrative delay, not a procedural delay.
But I would say typically courts try to push divorce, try to get you to resolve it in a year. But I think it takes closer to maybe 18 months to 2 years.
Okay.
And it can take a very long time if people are just not in agreement and filing lots of motions. I had a case that lasted, about close to 13 years.
13 years?
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Close to 13 years, maybe 11 years. And they were married for 13 months.
Wow.
So now during that time, were they physically in the same house?
Or not this particular case.
No.
But 13 years.
There was a lot of contentious behavior.
What
And
did they
and
have
there was a
for
child
13
involved.
years? I mean, 13 months.
It was fighting. They were married for 13 months, but they had a child.
They had a child, and a
And
lot of the fighting
it was fighting over
revolves
the
around
child.
the child.
It's a custody
People,
battle.
that's one of the things that's, we were talking about grounds trials where lawyers don't like to get into that because that's where the salaciousness, that's where the nastiness is.
Mhm.
So that's why we have no fault, because you don't really need that. But in custody matters, that's where it can get touchy and really muddy with people, because people are still using their children offensively, as it's kind of sad in some cases, but that's where you get a lot of the animosity. And in that kind of case, it can go on for years, especially if the child is young, as an infant or a toddler. 13 years, there's a lot of back and forth. I'm not paying for this, I'm going to pay for that. You take them here, you take them there. I want my weekend, I want my vacation time. You had a Thanksgiving last year, I want Christmas this year. All of that makes it contentious, and the years go by, and the child gets older, and actually there's a point at some point where the child actually has some say. The judge will ask a child at 14, what do you think? What do you want to do? And take that into some consideration as well. So, but that's it's very tough, especially when kids are involved with that. That's the hardest part.
Well, I guess since we're talking about parents, we have a question from one of the fathers, and they said, what should a dad have on his own in order to have split custody of their child?
Right. So I'm not entirely sure what they may mean when they say split custody, because that actually has a specific meaning in the legal context. I'm assuming that it at least means joint custody, so that the child's going to be with them. In split custody, that can also mean that you're maybe switching on and off one week.
Okay.
With one parent, the child is 1 week with the other parent, and back and forth. Sometimes it actually refers to when you have siblings and you might have one child with one parent and the other sibling with the other parent.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go with joint custody with considerable, maybe even equal time sharing arrangements. And essentially, you have to have everything that child would need in any home. So you want to make sure that you have a separate sleeping area for that child, preferably another bedroom. You don't want them sharing a bedroom, but the reality is that some people can't necessarily do that. They may have a 1-bedroom apartment, for instance, but then that child should have a sort of designated space and area that's theirs.
Right.
Because they have to feel comfortable. If this is supposed to be their home, they have to feel like they have a place of their own to sort of retreat to. You certainly have to have a separate bed. Sharing a bed at any age is going to be frowned upon. And you want to make sure that, depending on the age of the child, if it's a toddler, everything must be childproof. And those are the main things. You just want to make sure that they really have a comfortable place and a nurturing place for them.
So who will go in to check to make sure that that's there? And what if maybe I just have a 1-bedroom apartment and I don't have a quote unquote bed or a separate bedroom? Can the child stay in the living room? And we have a corner where they have their dresser.
You could do something like that. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule as far as what you actually have to have specifically. But as far as who goes in to check, well, it depends on where you are in the process. So when there is a child involved and you're getting into a custody dispute, often the court will appoint or order you to get an attorney for the child. We used to call them law guardians, guardian ad litem. Now you call it an attorney for the child. And they may or may not, well, actually, let me retract that, because the attorney for the child is not going to the home to investigate or anything. If you're in family court, particularly, the court will often order a court-ordered investigation, and they will send a worker to the home to just look at the home and make sure that it's appropriate, that the safety precautions are in place, that you have window guards. That's a big thing if you're in an apartment building. You must have those window guards. And they're looking at sockets, they're making sure there's sufficient food in the refrigerator, those kinds of things. But that's who would go in if the court orders a court-ordered investigation.
There was a posting I saw on Facebook some time ago where I think it was a commercial for IKEA, and it's a commercial where the child is in his room and the they show you he's drawing on a desk, has markers and things like that, and they show the room, and the child leaves the room and says, and the mother says, okay, your dad's here, and he picks him up, takes him to the dad's apartment, and the dad has a room exactly the same, same desk, same bed, same, everything's exactly the same. That would be probably the ideal situation, but you don't have to go that far.
Not necessarily realistic.
But if you've seen that post, it's a very good, it's nice, it's heartwarming, but you don't have to go to that extreme. If you can, then that's great, because then the kid is totally comfortable. And that's what the courts are focused on. The courts are always focused on the best interest of the child. You'll hear that phrase, no matter if you go in a family court, divorce, a Supreme Court in divorce cases, that's the best interest of the child, and that's what the judges are focused on. And they're not gonna stray from that. So, like Sharon said, if they're going to, send somebody to make sure that there's window guards and covers over the sockets, you got to make sure you do that. What's appropriate for the age of the child. I mean, you don't. If the child is 15, you probably don't have to worry too much about the sockets and that kind of thing. But, you have to make them comfortable as possible, as best you can.
And I was going to say, now, being comfortable, does that also involve a gaming system? Because a lot of these kids, no, I'm just saying, expect the TV, a gaming system.
Most kids will say they can't be comfortable
without it, right?
And a
You can't
computer.
without the phone, right? Yeah. Well, I guess you'll have to at least have Wi-Fi, right? Okay, I advise get Wi-Fi. That's the only advice you're gonna get tonight is have Wi-Fi.
I'm just being serious. That's a major issue.
Well, I guess we'll take a little quick break here. You are listening to Late Night Parents with Dr. Michelle, Ted Hicks, and Richie V. We are speaking with Robert and Sharon Hoskins on the sad subject, sometimes I guess, of divorce. So we have a question here. So we're talking about child support, children, the breakup, and the involvement there. Someone had the question, and this is just obviously coming from a man. How much should a man pay his spouse for child support until their divorce is final?
Every cent. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm kidding. There is a.
So we're going to ask Robert.
The minimum, the absolute statutory minimum.
I didn't finish that. I didn't finish. Every cent that you're obligated to pay. That's what I was going to say.
You're obligated.
So, the amount depends on how much you make. There is a formula in New York, and it's tied to your income, and it's compared to both parents' income. So if there's one child, it's going to be 17% of your gross income. You don't get to pay Uncle Sam first, although Uncle Sam always wants his money first. But whatever your if you make $50,000 and after taxes you only walk home with $35,000, it's 17% of the $50,000, and that's what for one child. Two children's 25%.
Is that money still taxable?
The money that you
have to of that 17%. So it's coming out of your income, but is it still considered for the IRS still taxable income?
Well, it's not. There's no tax consequence to that. So you've paid the taxes on your. In other words, you don't get to pay the 17% and deduct that, and then say, well, okay,
Right,
Uncle Sam,
deduction.
I'm paying
Okay.
you $50,000 minus 70%
Not that
taxes on
equity.
that. That's not how it works.
Okay.
You pay all your taxes on the
Yep.
full $50,000,
Yep.
and you also pay 17% of your $50,000.
Right. I think that that type of question is one that we get a lot, because that's what guys are concerned about. And I think the root of the question really is, and what I tell a lot of guys is that you are obligated to financially support your child. And I think a lot of guys are fine with that. They don't mind doing that. I think the problem is that the money has to go to the mother of the child. And that's where the problem is, right? Because that's who you have the issue with. That's who you're arguing with. You don't want to benefit the mother or your ex-wife. You just, if you're in the middle of this kind of action and you're obligated by the court is ordering you to pay, you're angry. You
Right.
do not want you don't want her to benefit from your money. If there's a way to pay the child directly, the money, you would do it.
Right.
I think every guy would do it. But unfortunately, if the child is with the mother, lives with the mother, you have to pay the money to the mother. It's just no real way to get around that. I mean, there's been people that have tried different things. There are ways to direct pay for certain things. Let's say for daycare, you can send your check directly to pay for the daycare or directly to pay for the karate lessons or the sports or whatever. You can do those kinds of things, but food, clothes, you know, the housing, those kinds of things, you know, and is it sad when you see the mother maybe getting her hair done and nails done every week?
Or as Kanye
And-
West
and
says,
you
if baby mama car crib is bigger than yours.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
That's not cool.
unfortunately, that's gonna happen sometimes. But you know, you have to always think that, you know, it's the obligation. I've got to do it. But also, what we like to emphasize with people is make sure that when you have the time with the child yourself, when it's your weekend or it's your week, make that quality time. Be in that child's life and be the dad. One of the calls that, you know, we always get a lot is, oh, I was a little, you know, she brought the child home late, or I didn't get him on time, or I was, you know, my time wasn't up yet.
Mhm.
I don't want people to get the idea that don't worry about the clock so much. Make the time that you have the quality time.
Mhm.
Whether, you know, depending upon what you do with the child, make it the experience of being a dad to
Mhm.
that child, no matter what the time it is, but make it quality. Meaning if you go to a game or if you go to a museum or something, make the experience for that child memorable, so that they know that their dad is focused on them.
Mhm.
Kids don't have to wear watches. They don't care what time they go back. Sometimes they don't want to go back if they're having that kind of quality time with you. But kids adapt better than adults do.
Kids are very adaptable.
And yeah, exactly. So.
Well, I want to finish because there's another part to that answer as far as how much you pay. Because I mentioned the formula, and you know, sorry, it's a little bit of bad news. There's more. There's a formula that says the monthly amount, but then in addition to that, you pay a percentage of things for extracurricular activities, for childcare, for education costs, and that's a percentage of your income. So if you make, for instance, 65% of the income and the other parent makes 35% of that combined income, you're going to pay 65% of those extra add-on expenses.
Oh, wow.
So it's 17% of your gross income plus whatever percentage of your remaining, you know, of the cost of those extra items for, you know, whether it's karate, tutoring, childcare, medical expenses, those that are additional costs.
So I'm going
to
to play devil's advocate. So what if we have a child and I'm saying that I'm going to send them to the top boarding school that there is in the country, but he doesn't want to?
Decision making.
So
Yes.
what happens there?
Well, that goes back to what Rob just said. That's decision making. So, and if you have a joint custody agreement, chances are you have joint decision making. And so now you're butting heads, and it depends on where you are in the scheme of things. So if this is brand new and you were sending them to public school last week and last year, and they've been in public school for, you know, 3 years, 4 years, you don't suddenly get to pull them out and put them into the most expensive boarding school. It's just not realistic. It's not feasible, and the pockets can't, you know, absorb that. So you won't get to do that. But if you've been sending this kid to private school for most of their school career, then that's a pattern you have set up for them. And it's reasonable to expect that they're going to go to another private school. You may not get to go to the most expensive one if you can't afford it. But if you can afford it and you have good reasons to show why that school is appropriate, then chances are you're going to have to pay for them to go to that school. But it just depends on what kind of lifestyle you have set up for that child at that time and what the parents can afford.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick plug. I know we're having a great conversation, but this is Late Night Parents, and we have Ted Hicks, Rich Valdez, and Fit Doc, Dr. Michelle, with our special guests, Sharon and Robert Hoskins from Hoskins, and they specialize in family law. So we're going to keep moving with these conversations because we've had a lot of questions that have come up.
Sure.
So here's the next question. This is a legislation kind of advice question that's come across. Oh, and also, by the way, Renee Daniel Flagler says hello, ladies. On
Hi,
our
Renee.
live
Hey,
Facebook.
Renee. Thanks for
So-
tuning in, Renee.
Question that's come across is, what important thing would you tell someone before they got married, and what important thing would you tell them before they file for divorce?
I would
Two
say,
very big
right.
questions.
Two very
very big.
One could depend
don't
on the
file for divorce before you get married.
There you
Nope.
go.
I think
But
that's a
but
technical.
But wait a second. Then I don't know if
possibility.
you should go back to the beginning and then talk about prenups then.
Well, we do
Well.
have some prenup. You know what? So let's do that.
Okay.
Let's
go
do that.
to
So-
the prenup question.
Well, so yeah, that's a
That'll
good
answer-
answer to that question. Before you get married, talk about whether or not you need a prenup.
Yes.
So, but
right.
nowadays we're seeing not just the upper class talking about
Mhm.
prenups. We're seeing middle class
Absolutely.
talking about that.
Absolutely.
And how often and what do you suggest that people do as far as developing or coming up with a prenup?
Well, first of all, I always say with prenups, a lot of people get offended when someone offers the idea of a prenup. I say look at it as an opportunity and not an insult, because at that point you have the most leverage you're going to have in terms of coming up with an agreement that's going to protect you, right? Because once you're married, then you're already married. You don't have the leverage of saying, I'm not going to get married to you unless you sign this document that says XYZ. But you want to, the reason why we see a shift and you have more middle class people looking at the prenup is because I think because you have a lot of people getting married later in life. And for their first marriages or later in life, a lot of people are focusing more on careers and just establishing themselves, and they now have accumulated assets. They may own a home already. You also have a lot more than in many years past. You have a lot more people who have children outside of marriage or from other relationships, and you want to protect those children. So you want to come up with an agreement that will protect those and allow you to do with that property that you have or deal with the children that you may have without the constraints that there might be otherwise if you didn't have that agreement. So it protects your assets and keeps it from going to the other spouse. So I think that's why you have so many more middle class people looking at that now. You just have more assets now by the time you do get married.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that our firm is trying to do. One of the things efforts that we're trying to put out there in the public purview, as Sharon mentioned, was that when you're presented with a prenup, usually it's the rich guy presents it to, and I'm the secretary or whoever it is. Those scenarios are always treated with, oh, you don't trust me, and how could you make me sign this? And like Sharon said, it's actually an opportunity for the person who's not in a financial position, because you have the leverage at that point. And one of the things that we want to do is change that narrative where the premarital, let's call it a premarital agreement, or the marital agreement, is a chance for you to get in writing, or at least have the discussion as to how do we deal with finances, and what do we deal with, if we have children, not just what happens if we get divorced, but this is how you view banking. This is, should we have a joint account? Should we have a separate account? Should we have both? Those kinds of conversations. A lot of times people are caught up in the romance and the wedding planning, and they don't look at, well, how are we going to function as a family unit? Because that's what marriage is all about, right? And that's why the state makes it hard to get divorced, because the state, the government, encourages marriage and encourages population growth. And we as a firm, we encourage marriage. We actually, we don't try to break people up just so that we can get business. That's
You
not
heard
what
that
we do.
live.
No, we don't try to break you up. Hey, listen, there's sometimes marriages just don't work, and that's when you have to come see us. But but we want to, like I've said to people, if you don't have a will, let's jump into that area for a quick second. If you don't have a will, the government and the law decides what happens to your property. Well, if you don't have a prenup or a marital agreement, then the divorce laws decide what happens when you get divorced, when it's time for divorce. And it's called the domestic relations law. That's what it is. That's when Sharon mentioned the formula for child support, it's in the law. That's who decides. But if you can decide ahead of time and you have it written down and agreed to, then it's a simple matter of enforcing the agreement that you've come up with. Now, hopefully you would never have to use it, but if you have it, it makes the process a little more, easier to deal with. I don't know if easier is the right word, but it gives you a blueprint. So we want to try to, encourage people, because like Sharon said, there are people who are getting married a little bit later in life, and they've accumulated some assets. There's a lot more people that are entrepreneurial. They have businesses. There's a lot of women that have businesses, and they're, and they're doing a lot of different things. So if you and your fiance are both, career people and have businesses and have a lot of things going on, you want to have something in place just in case these things, unfortunately, if you go down that road, you don't want to have a roadmap in place, as opposed to getting into a bitter battle, which, I mean, we don't mind because, that's how we make money, but, we can also make money, preparing and prenuptial agreements as well. There's that's nothing for us, but litigation is where the divorce lawyers have always, made that's where the money is made. And the only people that you always hear, the only people that win are the divorce lawyers. My divorce lawyer got everything. My wife got half, and the divorce lawyer got the other half.
But you know what I was going to say? It sounds like the two of you should start doing some bonding with churches and hook up when they do the premarital counseling to encourage prenuptial agreements.
We actually talked about that a while back. About
See, that's my idea.
Thank you. I think you mentioned it before.
We can do that.
But we talked about that part of having something where when you do that premarital counseling, you need to have the divorce lawyers come in and kind of give you the sort of almost doomsday scenario. This is what could happen to you if you don't do X, Y, and Z. But that's, I think, it's something people really need to think about. Yeah. And not only does it kind of give you a roadmap for what to do if it doesn't go the way you hoped, it kind of tells you who you're marrying, right? Because if this is when you're all lovey-dovey and you want to be together, and they're not willing to protect you when times aren't so bad, and they're not willing to say, well, I'm not paying you any kind of support. What, you go do it on your own? Then it kind of says, like, wait a minute. How much do you really care for me? And maybe I shouldn't be entering into this marital relationship with you, or maybe we need to give it more time. So it's like I said, an opportunity to see what you can, maybe what you can get, or maybe what you're getting into.
And that happens. I mean, we've had clients that come in to ask about prenups or to review a prenup, and then the wedding's off. Not
that we forced
it. We didn't force it.
But I think it's part of the whole grand
But it
plan.
happens, right?
It needs to be, because a lot of times that's what you want to discuss. You want to discuss the love and what's going to happen at the wedding and how we're going to look and the honeymoon and where we're going to live.
Oh yeah.
But the financial aspect is something that's very important.
Right. There's the wedding, and then there's the marriage.
Right.
And we want people to focus on not only preparing a fantastic wedding, but focus on the marriage. You're a family. You're going to be a family unit once you do that. And that's what people got to understand. It's a legally, contractually bound and enforceable act. Once that marriage is done, you're in it.
It's a legal contract.
It's a legal contract.
So let me ask you, when a couple comes in saying that they want to get divorced, do you immediately start the proceedings, or do you is there an interview where you want to make sure that they know what they're getting into when they say they want to get a divorce? Do you just say, let's do it?
Well, we usually don't jump right in. We ascertain what do you want out of this? Do you actually want a divorce, or are you just looking for information so you can kind of weigh your options? And we try to get a roadmap from that person as far as what they want to do. Like he said earlier, we're not pushing divorce on anyone. When you come to us, I want to make sure that you have decided that divorce is what you want. Right. Some people may say, I think I just want separation, and they want to understand the difference between separation and divorce. And, and of course, others it may not be divorce, it would be a prenup or enforcement of an agreement that already exists. But as far as whether we rush into court, most of the time I try not to, because I think it's so much better to try to reach an agreement with the other party, because you can fashion that agreement to your particular needs and situation. If you have to go to court and have the judge do it, the judge has like how many hundreds, thousands of other cases that they're dealing with. They have only a few minutes to really kind of look at yours. I mean, more than a few minutes, maybe a couple hours, depending on how long the case is before them. But they can't devote the amount of time and attention that you certainly should be devoting to your own life. So you're releasing all your power to this third party who knows very little about your family, and they are going to make that decision, and you're stuck with it for life.
Right. If you're at the point where you're calling a divorce attorney, you're ready. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, we've had clients that have come in and then have reconciled after speaking with us. We've had people that we said, you know what, maybe you need to seek marital counseling, because there's a lot of counseling that you can get. So, I would encourage people to, seek counseling if you're not sure. But if you're going to call a divorce attorney, you're going to schedule an appointment with us, it's pretty much, that's where you're going.
So then are you seeing couples come in, or are you seeing individuals?
Oh, no, it's individuals. It's individual. We can't represent both. So it has to be the individual. And in fact, if the wife comes in, then we cannot even speak with the husband.
Okay.
Because that would be a conflict of interest.
But we do offer mediation services, so that if one spouse contacts us and if they, if the situation is appropriate, we would say, look, if you guys are interested in mediation, it'll cost this and it'll take about this much time, and that might be a better alternative for you. But once they both show up and we engage in the mediation, then we cannot then represent. If it devolves into litigation, we can't represent either party at that point.
Yeah, we don't get to choose the one we like better.
What exactly is mediation?
So mediation is it's a way of resolving your divorce issues without going to court. And so as the mediator, I would serve really as a facilitator to help you reach an agreement. So I help the two of you work together to fashion an agreement for you. And I write up the agreement. You sign. I ask you to actually take it to two separate attorneys so that you can have someone look over it with you, make sure it is what you think it is. And then once you get sign off on that, we finalize the papers and we submit an uncontested divorce packet of papers to the court. But the mediation process, it takes a number of sessions, but it's a way of working with a couple to do it on their own. And I, also to give suggestions and a guidance on how other people may have handled certain situations, what your options are, how you can really. I like to be creative with these things. I like to see what's going on in your life. How can we make this so that it can work for both of you? And that's what we work towards.
So Ted, that sounds like we need to get a mediator for you and my relationship.
Wait, I thought that was my job. So here we go.
We can put you on one side of the glass and you on this side. That's it. We're done.
Put them both in a room together and just let them.
Oh, we could do. Yeah, that's it.
We'll put that on Facebook.
I mean, I go away for a week and then I come back and he doesn't want to talk on the show.
That's okay. You should have brought him some candy or something from the airport. You get him one of those magnets for the refrigerator. Or a T-shirt. Hey, I was in Phoenix, and here's a T-shirt.
So let me see. I'm guessing we probably have all seen the movie War of the Roses. Remember that? I'm sure that was way over the top. But so the question has come up though. Have you ever encountered a case that was out of the ordinary? So now, of course, you obviously can't name people and have to protect identities and everything. We fully understand that. But what would have been, I guess, the most outrageous case, if you will, that you ran into?
Well, none that was so outrageous as that, with the swinging from the chandeliers and so forth. One that was very interesting was really it was the divorce that wasn't. Is that
the
what
divorce that really wasn't? Yeah.
So this couple had been, I'll say, together for about 20 or 25 years.
Let's back up. They got married.
They got married.
They were married. They were married, an official ceremony, fully married, and then about 6 months later, the husband got a divorce, but didn't tell her. Air quotes, divorce.
Right?
Okay.
So somehow he was able to get it to bar. I mean, it looked like there was service of a summons with notice, and someone accepted this, whether it was her or not is questionable. And then she defaulted. She never showed up because, according to her, she never received anything.
Right.
But the court said, well, everything looks to be, kosher and ready to go. So the court gave him a judgment of divorce. Now, again, I said he never told her. So he nicely put this little document away in his drawer and continued to stay with this woman for 25 years.
Wow.
Kids,
They had children.
vacations.
Oh,
Wait.
stop it.
Yes.
And they were having sexual relations.
Well, yeah,
Of course, they had children.
Yeah, right.
Sure, they had 2 properties, had vacation home. They had
Retired together.
retired from their
Yeah.
jobs,
Named each other as, beneficiaries on, pension.
filed taxes jointly.
But
That's a big deal.
But, according to
At least
him
he
in
was-
his document, they were
according-
divorced.
well-
And as far as she they were married.
Right.
So then it came the time where things didn't quite go so well, and they decided, okay, it's time. He decided he wanted to be divorced and actually live separately, and so he's kind of like, "Pal, there
Here
you
it
go.
is.
You
Oh,
gotta go.
wow.
Guess
We're
what?
divorced.
We're
Guess
already
what?"
divorced.
And and that means
Wow.
she doesn't get if they're divorced. That means she doesn't have any rights to all the property. She doesn't get any spousal support. She doesn't get child support is a different story. She would still be entitled to that. But, all that they have built up, all the retirement assets and the pension plans, she doesn't get any of that because she's not a wife. So it was very interesting. And he stood by that document. He said, no, we are divorced, and I refuse to vacate it or withdraw it or anything. And we actually had to take it to court, and we were successful.
We got the judgment vacated because you can't if you're going to be divorced, you have to be divorced.
Right.
You can't then go ahead and file taxes jointly. You can't raise children together. You can't live together. You have to actually be divorced. So guess what? The judge says, you know what? You're not really divorced, are you? And I believe that you didn't serve this right. So the judgment was vacated, and it was really interesting. It was, like Sharon said, it was something that I had never heard of. And, but there's folks that are always trying to game the system,
Right.
one way or the other. But most attorneys kind of can see through a lot of those kinds of things. And he definitely left the courthouse with smoke coming out of his ears that day.
Wow.
And Sharon had just
and
pretty much
put himself in a pretty dangerous position
Yeah.
because remember, judges are mandatory reporters to the IRS.
to the IRS, right?
And he had been
Yeah.
defrauding the IRS for 20 years. That's a
Wow.
lot of
Right.
money in penalties and back taxes.
Exactly.
So, I think she kind of let that one slide. I won't say who the judge was or what
Wow.
county.
No, that was,
But,
yeah,
it's
it was
not
a bad
a good
move
thing
on
to
his
do.
part. A bad move. Yeah, but that's actually, what was the other one that you had mentioned?
And now I don't even remember.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
there
there was one I thought. We had a case where the couple said they wanted to get divorced. They claimed they wanted
Oh,
to get
yeah.
divorced. And then you get to court, they look like they were coming here to get a marriage license.
Oh, yeah. They
So-
left hand in hand.
And even the judge said, "Wait,
Look.
who's getting divorced? These two are getting divorced." I said, "Yes, those are the parties." He said, "Well, they don't look like they really. They're kissing, and
Practically
holding
making
hands
out
and-
in the courtroom.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
just didn't want to be married.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
They wanted to date.
Right.
They wanted to
That's
date.
what they wanted to do.
forever.
Yeah.
And so, the judge was like, "Get out of here." So, they did not get divorced, and they are still married.
Oh, wow.
I'm
Yeah.
glad it didn't work out.
They
So
just
that-
maybe want to just push the envelope and just
Yeah.
see how far they could push the other one.
Maybe.
Those are some
That's
of
what I'm
those
thinking.
those are some of the unusual things, but there's the rough stuff is still kind of the norm, unfortunately, though, with kids, and the animosity is always there. But those are just a couple of the kind of quirky things that we've seen.
Okay. Well,
Interesting.
We are running low on time now.
Wow, that
and
went
I
fast.
get the impression we could probably sit here and just have this conversation on and on and on. Here's some more stories.
But you know what that means? That means that we have to have them back
We
again.
have to have them back again.
Oh, that would be great. We'd love to come back.
Because I still have an answer to that other question, but maybe we'll have to save
Okay,
that.
we'll save that one. That sounds
We're
good.
gonna put
What to
that
do before you file for divorce. We'll have to
Okay.
save that.
Okay.
So, what would be? We always ask this of all of our guests. What would be the best ways for anyone to get in contact with you if they're interested or in need of your services?
Absolutely. We have our main office is in Uniondale, Long Island at RXR Plaza. And so you can reach us there at 516-522-2616. And we have a 212 number also. We do serve all the 5 boroughs. Well, maybe not all 5, but I don't usually go to Staten Island. No offense to Staten Island. Love you. It's just hard to get there. So that number is 212
776
1330.
212-776-1330. And you can also email us at info@hoskinsllp.com. Our website is www.hoskinsllp.com. You can send us an email through there. We're also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook, Twitter. We're on
LinkedIn.
all of them. LinkedIn. Yeah, you can just put in Hoskins LLP. You'll find us.
Awesome.
Link us, friend us, like us, and we'll like back and we'll follow back too.
Send questions. Very good. Well, it has been a pleasure